Got a few people coming in now.
Okay. Welcome everybody again to another off-grid conversion control training session. I'm Sean Wander, and along with my partner Mitchell German here for you again. We appreciate you taking some time out of your busy day to join us here live. And just to clarify a couple of different things, we're continuing to move along in the series of these trainings, going through the various elements of the software. But just keep in mind that as we do this, these are all things that are designed to lead you towards the greater purpose in all this, which is ultimately the creation of your branding, your messaging, and all of the various elements that are eventually going to go into the messaging for your product and service campaigns. So what we're trying to do here as we take over the left side of the software and position control is really build the proper foundation of the brainstorming elements that you're thinking about for what's going to be the anchor for your position and your strategy. After this training session today, we're going to then be moving into the actual messaging elements. So if you are planning on attending those, I guarantee you're going to get a tremendous amount of value out of them, because that's when we're really going to have the rubber meet the road. We're going to give you some great examples, provide a lot of elements that you can use when you're setting up these actual campaigns. So you probably noticed the sticky. Again, we've got that delay of anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute, but when you first came in, you probably saw the sticky. If you've got questions at any time, the chat is turned off for the public, but we do see them, and we are responding to questions either directly to you if it's appropriate, or we talk about them live on the training if it's going to help and serve the group that's here today. So today we're going to be covering obstacles, and we're also going to talk about influence. And again, these would be the third and the fourth tabs in the software under the position control side of it. So again, we're going to start with some questions. I know we've just given people about 10-15 seconds to catch up a little bit, see if they brought any questions in. If you have questions, we'll wait about 20 seconds as Mitch and I sort of get our intro going here. If we see questions come along, we'll try to get those first. I realize that some people, as much as they'd love to stay here the entire time, you may not be able to do that. So if you came and you brought some questions from previous trainings or just in general, go ahead and type those questions in now, so that we can see those and respond to them if they're there. If not, we're going to just go ahead and move on right to the training for obstacles is where we'll start. So we'll just wait a couple minutes. Mitch, any opening thoughts?
No, I think you covered it pretty good. I think today we're going to be covering, as Sean pointed out, we're going to go through objections and influence. We're going to try and cover those two tabs. The interesting thing about objections for me has been that when for those of you who may or may not know, some of you know this, my roommate in college was Andy Jenkins. So they've got their big launch still going on right now, and so we were pretty close, obviously, when we were in college together, and even after college. And I still remember when Andy got going. I'm sorry about the noise in my house, but it's summer and the kids are home and all that, so we'll just have to hopefully not be interrupted too much. But so me and Andy were pretty close after college. We worked together, and then he started getting into internet marketing. And I still remember he was selling stuff on eBay, and then he had an armor store. Many of you probably don't know the history. And then eventually led to the StomperNet launch. And I still remember the StomperNet launch was so huge. I was like, okay, I'm sitting here on the sidelines watching this whole thing, and I really got to jump on the bandwagon. So that was about 2008 was the StomperNet launch. I think I got the date correct. And maybe 2009 I started developing the real writing product, the screenwriting thing, which eventually led to the software, which is what led to offer conversion control. The interesting thing about that was, as I was building that out, I was really, and marketing, I started marketing before Sean was involved. I started marketing, and what I was doing was looking at what other marketers were doing. I was copying their, I look at their videos, say, okay, I can do a video like this. So I built, a marketing video that did well. I was making money with it, and I looked at the copy, that kind of copy they were doing, and I wrote copy like that. And I imagine a lot of people do their development of their copy and their videos in a similar way. They look at what the experts are doing, and they try and emulate that. And what's great about the software is it allows you to really deconstruct your own message, and then as we move into the funnel control phase, build your own actual copy in a way, and then you can emulate, but you can be really, clear about what it is that relates to your own product or service. So let me get to the point of the story. So then Sean came along, and we became partners, and he got involved. And the first thing he does, he says, "What we have to do is we have to do this objections exercise." I'd never done an objections exercise before, and it really struck me as being extraordinarily valuable. And one of the things I never assumed, no matter how much people, because if you had met me at that time, you probably would have thought I knew a heck of a lot about marketing. I was doing really well, and I was pretty good at it, but I'd never done an objections exercise. And correct me if I'm wrong, you said, Sean, that you got that from Rich Schefren.
Yeah, that particular exercise actually came from Rich Schefren, and he had basically said, and again, I had heard this in different forms from different people, but he was the first one to specifically say, sit down, and no matter how hard it is, make sure that you come up with at least 20 objections that you need to answer, and just take the time to think of 20 different objections that you need to address so that it can go into your marketing. Because the deeper you go with this, I mean, the objections, remember, these are your resistance points, and they're forming the foundation for what you are going to run into when people are there at the conversion point making a decision. And the more that you can actually sort of take the elephant out of the room and introduce those points of objection and address them properly in your messaging, literally any resistance just disappears. And so that's ultimately our goal, is to just try to remove as much resistance as we can during every step of the way. So to your point, Mitch, yes, Rich introduced that side of the exercise.
Well, that's what I recall was the conversation was, and I thought it was such a powerful exercise, but the truth is, even then, I probably didn't appreciate the full value of this exercise that we're going to talk about today. When you talk about the software, core elements is certainly the most critical part of thinking through your actual product and its relationship to your customer and who your customer is. But then we talk about story, but probably objections, maybe even trump story to a certain degree in terms of importance. Where there's a big story to tell, obviously that's important. But core elements and objections are essential, and it's one of the reasons we elevated it in terms of this version of the software as opposed to the original offer control, where it's just one bubble that then we broke them out. And really what you do with objections is, and this is what I wanted to point out, was that it's not just about you identify the key objections. Is the goal with this is to not only know what the objections are that your customer, your prospective customer, may be thinking about or ultimately bringing up, is to address those in your messaging. And you don't do it on the nose, that you weave into your messaging an answer to that objection before they actually can think it or voice it, before it becomes a tangible thing. Ideally, that's where you want to address your objections. So I think with that introduction, we're going to I'll turn it back over to Sean to talk about objections just a little bit here.
Right. So I would say, Mitch, let's go ahead and bring up the software for everybody to see, and we can go ahead and lock it on software for a moment. And so basically, one of the things we referred to, for those that saw the email, we wanted to cover a few key points in this process today. And one of them, we sort of framed it as the 7 barriers to getting the sale. And again, this is framed from the concept of the objections, because the objections are going to be those resistance points. And what we've basically done here in the software, ultimately there are many others, and there are a lot of little nuanced objections that come within each of these categories, but for the most part, we sort of identified 7 different areas where you're going to meet rejection. Where you're going to have objection points. The first are objections that are related to price. Too much, too little, not enough, the value. The second objection type is going to refer to elements of time. I simply don't have time to do this. How long will it take me? Will I be successful in X amount of time? The third are ability or knowledge. I believe you can do it, but I don't necessarily believe that I can do it. Anything that has to do with ability or knowledge. Fourth is competition. Well, I already see other people doing this. There are others just like you, and some of them are even cheaper. There are so many already. What makes you so different? So anything related to competition. And again, I'm just giving a broad overview here. We're going to dig into all of these much deeper. don't need it. I've got other tools that use it. It's just I've been getting by this far for this long. Why do I need this now? Next is why pay? Somewhat related to price, but why pay for it? I can search for the answers on YouTube and pretty much get any training that I need on anything. Technology. Well, I've got old machinery. Why will it do it? Or I only use mobile. Your software only works on Windows and Mac. So anything related to technology, and last but not least, just another category, which is anything that in some way, shape, or form doesn't fall into those other elements. So let's go all the way back to the left, and let's talk about price. And this is, of course, going to be the most common objection we run into, objections related to price. Some way, shape, or form, either it's not the right time, they just can't afford it now. And so what we're doing in this exercise, again, we're always approaching it from the framework of trying to establish a minimum of 20 questions, 20 different objection points, even if they become somewhat similar, going through that exercise of thinking. And that's really what this is. This is an exercise in strategic thinking to try to identify as many resistance points as possible. And some people may think that, well, there are some that may not have these resistance points, and if you bring it into your messaging, well, now you're starting to inject resistance that may not have been there. And there is a position that you could take where that's somewhat true. However, at some point, that objection is going to come up, whether it's through the user experience, whether it's remembering just at a later date, or whether it's because some other product jogs their memory, and then they go back and realize, you know what, that's true, I didn't even think about that when I purchased this. And so it is exponentially more powerful, we found, to be able to not have to run away from any of these resistance points, to be able to creatively think about not only what the objection could be, but how to solve it specifically so that you're literally meeting the resistance point head on. So let's give it a few examples of what we mean, okay? If we're talking about price objections, Mitch, what are some of the most common price objections we may go in? We'll just go ahead and fill in a couple of these in bubbles just for fun, so you guys can see, some of the points, and obviously
we should try and do the exercise around the product potentially. I mean, we could use the software. We wanted to talk about our software. We could talk about.
Sure. Well, if that's the case, we'll make this interactive then. So I realize, again, the delay, but for those of you, as we're going through this, you'll probably hear this in about 30 to 45 seconds. Go ahead and chime in the chat box. Just type in some of the objections in each of these categories as we move in. And if the category is not price, it's okay. We'll fill them in appropriately along the way in the training. But go ahead and think about some of the objections that you can come up. And let's have some fun. Let's talk about our software. Let's talk about ControlWriter. As long as we're on it, let's think about any possible objection we could have for using ControlWriter software. And of course, most of you here, all of you, most really, should be users of the software in some form, one of our brands, whether it's the real writing, whether it's offering conversion control, whether it's offer control, whichever one it is, you've had some exposure to the software. So price. And what Mitch is basically doing here is he's listing the objection here in the primary bubble here, the note bubble, and to the right, we're talking about what some of those answers or approaches might be to handling the objection. So obviously too expensive. And let's get even more specific. Let's talk about a little context. I mean, we can say we'll start with general, too expensive. What are some other price-related objections that we could talk about? We can talk about let's see. In terms of too expensive, we can talk about even in the case of payment plans. Let's talk about that. I see you do 2 payments. Can you do 3? Or we need more payment plans. The payment plans are still too high. Or just in general, the idea of financing. I know some companies do financing. Do you guys do financing?
What they're doing with the PayPal payments.
Right. And if you've been following, of course, Mike and Andy's Traffic Genesis launch, you know that they're emphasizing heavily the ability with PayPal's Bill Me Later which is essentially the idea to actually purchase and use the product. And I believe it's 6 months where you don't have to make a payment, and so you're essentially getting the use of a $9.97 product for 6 months without even having to make a single payment on it using the PayPal Bill Me Later option. So there are some nuances about that. We won't spend a lot of time talking about that here, but again, there are so many different options out there that you can do. So the point here is, I think, Mitch, price is one that I think we can all relate to, so we won't spend as much time on this one. The bottom line is anything that has to do with price being too high. Let's go ahead and just talk about the other side of the equation. Most often you see too high. Some people are like, look, this is something, guys, I think that should be a $9.97 product. Why are you charging so low? Something doesn't seem right. You've got all these hard dollar values here of a few $1,000s. Why are you only charging $250? So we see that sometimes. Ironically, some people, just because they see a big price tag, they perceive that automatically as having more value. And unfortunately, in the industry, I'm sure some of you had the experience where it was far from the value of the price they were asking. And
so what's one way we could answer the
too cheap? Why so cheap? Let's just use what Mike and Andy did in their framing. If you go back to the Video Genesis launch. One of the things they did exceptionally well in terms of not only telling their marketing story, their Genesis story, and also helping the product launch was they had established the value of the product as super high, and they had basically set everyone's expectation that they were going to be coming out with yet another $9.97 or $19.97 price point. And then when they introduced the story of marketing like the money doesn't matter, they said, well, what if we had the power? What if we had the ability to provide all this value that everyone's expecting to pay a couple $1,000s for, but we just basically introduced the democratization of this information? What if we still gave it to them at a price that just about everybody can afford? And for them at the time, it seemed revolutionary compared to what the rest of the industry was doing. And so that's what happened. So they basically took that, and their explanation for the low price point was, look, we want to make it so that everyone can afford this. This information deserves to be in the hands of everybody. And with our software, we take very much the same approach. We say, look, at the end of the day, the training is fantastic and it's great, but it's the software product that really grounds it into an application that you can use and get real results from. And so we want to make sure that that part of the tool can be in the hands of as many people as possible. And of course, this is the thinking behind Microsoft Office and their change to Office 365, making it, I believe, Mitch, it's now down to, I think it's $97 for the annual.
$99 a year, and you get 5 computers.
You get 5 computers, and it's come a long way from being, clearly their model is, look, these are the tools that we use every day, competing with Google Docs and all the free.
Right, and they were forced into it because now there's a legitimate alternative to their product, so they've got to answer that.
Absolutely. So the seems too cheap is something that comes up, and you have to have an answer for that. So those are just some of the expenses. Someone is asking, Liz is actually asking, where are you making these bubble diagrams? Just curious. Liz, right now we are in offer and conversion control software. So the actual software program is opened up. Right now Mitch is in the Objections tab. That's the tab. So underneath all these, Mitch is creating the bubbles just by clicking on the arrows and opening and basically creating bubbles, and then the sub bubbles by using the arrows in the lower right corner of the main bubble there.
This is the main control writer engine sort of that allows for that functionality.
Absolutely. All right, so let's move on to note time. So what are some of the most common note time issues? Well, let's just talk with note time. You know what, guys? I'm so overwhelmed with information already. I just don't have time to learn a new product. Just don't have time to learn something new. Extra space there, and overwhelmed with information already, no time, I already work 2 jobs, I'm trying to do this on the side, I just don't have time for anything new. Let's see what other ones we can come up with. And again, feel free to contribute your suggestions along the way, folks. Just type them in and we will.
Not have anything new is sort of the general category. Overwhelmed with information, you know,
right.
Busy at work.
Busy at work.
In terms of the software, or if we still again try and ground it in the software.
Right.
Yeah.
Learn, well, even again, as it relates to software, just it has to do with sort of no time to learn, which is related to the next one, in ability knowledge, but still just no time to learn how to use it effectively. And what you also have to realize in all this, and this is a key point, is that these objections that we're thinking about here are based on what people's perception is. It doesn't make them true. Just because the objection is uttered, it doesn't mean that it's true. It's our job as vendors to really clarify and say, look, this is what the perception is, but let me correct that myth. Here is the real story. And then you have to have the approach. So when someone says, I'm overwhelmed with info already, it's just too much to learn, sometimes the way to address these is actually to challenge the objection directly. It's to say, well, what makes you say that? Because I would say, you don't have time not to learn these things. If you're expecting, and let's just say someone didn't want to go through the exercise of writing objections. They may say, look, this is great, but this is going to take me a lot of time to really sit down and brainstorm and do all of these things. In fact, one of the biggest resistance points that we encounter when we're talking with people about the power of working through this kind of a process is, but it takes so long. I mean, it takes so long to do the thinking strategy. And the reality is, so few people are really willing to sit down and think through these processes. And that's the reason why so few people ultimately reach the level of success, because the ones that are willing to sit down and go through it are the ones that are going to see the results. And what we always tell people is, these aren't optional. Whether you're doing this from unconscious competence or through conscious competence by following a step-by-step checklist, every single one of these elements is critical in order to addressing what's ultimately going to form the framework of your message and having that impact. So no time, to me, really becomes almost a moot point, because it's really about telling people how to reprioritize their time to include the important things that are going to really deliver the best results.
But it sounds like you said, but in terms of what we said earlier, is that what you want to do is understand where these no-time objections may be entering the conversation taking place in the mind of your prospective customers, and addressing those, not directly, but in a way indirectly. So if they're overwhelmed with info already, and that's one of the things we think they may be objecting to in their minds, or even voicing potentially, is we're going to frame our message about how critically important this info is. We're going to weave that in when we get into funnel control, just how essential this knowledge is. In other words, we're going to flip it over. So we're going to be talking about how essential this information is, and that is going to answer this sort of overwhelmed with info already. Well, I guess if it's so important, I need to know it. It's just we preempt that thought. I put down busy at work. I was just trying to give an example, but maybe the way we would answer something like that is that the added value, and we would say it in our messaging somewhere, the added value that this program will give you will provide you a distinct edge and more opportunities for success. A statement like that sort of trumps the idea that I'm busy at work. This trumps the busyness at work. Finally, a more relevant one is no time to learn a new program. And as it applies to software, what we're going to do is we're going to demonstrate how easy this software is to use. We can talk about demonstration later. When we go in our sales videos that we make about the software, demonstrating the simplicity of this software, the control writer software, is a big part of it. And people look at that and say, oh, well, it doesn't become an issue like, how am I going to learn a new piece of software? They see it. It's just like Liz saw it. It was like, hey, what is that you're using? That looks really good. Expand on what her comment. It's like, wow, that's really cool. How are you making those bubbles so easily? Is like her question. I'm expanding a little bit, but because she sees how simple I'm doing this, she's even asking a question about it. And the point is that when we demonstrate the simplicity of the software, and if you watch the video, we show, oh, look how easy it is to go from tab to tab, and look, I can drag things around so easily. The point of that is to trump that exact objection, which also applies into ability knowledge. I mean, well, they they cross over. In other words, over here in ability to knowledge, I would say can't learn a new piece of software. They're at computers, whatever. The same exact objection is answered, demonstration, right? Each one of these necessarily address each one. I got to answer this. The same answer applies to both of these objections. We demonstrate how easy the software is to use. So on that note, we moved on to ability and knowledge, Sean.
Right. So again, ability and knowledge. And the one thing that's coming over that I hope you're all picking up on is the idea that at the end of the day, when we're telling this story and we're weaving these objections into our process, remember that we are always going to control the frame. So when we're marketing a product, we are telling the story that just because we're raising the objection, it doesn't mean that we have to keep that in the form that we're stating it. So, and the example we used, of course, with time is the reframe there is, well, how can you not make the time for something that's more important? So what you might actually do in telling that story is you're really letting people realize that actually the problem isn't not having enough time. It's that I need to manage my time better. And I need to be more clear about the activities that are going to most lead to the key results. And when you get people thinking in that direction, then they realize that their original objection wasn't actually an objection at all. It was just simply a rote response that they've been telling themselves over and over again that's been holding them back. And when you actually start to show how your product or service is going to clear those barriers and stop them from getting in the way of themselves, that's when you have something really powerful. So again, ability and knowledge is a big one. There's I always come back to this old element of sort of, I want to say it was Dan Kennedy, I'm pretty sure it was, but there's basically those three things that you sort of have to cross. Number one, you have to establish your own credibility in something. Number two, you have to establish the fact that and make people believe that you can coach them through it. And the third, of course, which is the biggest, is can you actually coach someone as dumb as me to be able to go ahead and do it? And when you can nail all three of those, of course he said the third one facetiously, but it really is the truth. It's, hey, look, I definitely believe that, that Mike Filsame and Andy Jenkins know how to do a product launch. They have demonstrated it time and time again. And you know what? I even believe that that you can coach some people who are good at marketing. I believe you guys can take this software and this process and really teach somebody who is interested in this how to do it. But the real key is, look, I have no experience here. I'm new to marketing. I don't really understand all this. Can you teach someone like me, a novice, to use this process effectively when I'm trying to create a product or service? And I just want to share with you that we have a number of new members in our Control Writer community that come from different backgrounds, including many people that were part of our Real Writing film and television brand. So these are folks who are basically writers, and I don't want to embarrass anyone, so I won't call them by name, but these are people who are essentially writers, and they're realizing, well, something, I have to market in the film industry too. If I want to sell a script or I want to pitch a television show, I want to have an understanding of who I'm talking to, who my market is, what the branding around my script and my writing process is. I have stories that I want to tell. How can I make that message more interesting? And so these are people who are getting their first foray really into the world of marketing and sales. And so it's critical that this program and that our teaching is able to translate into those other markets. So these are the real critical things that you have to address in terms of ability knowledge. So can't learn a new piece of software. People feel they've got technology barriers. And this one of the things that Apple, although my partner Mitch would often disagree, we have this inside joke going all the time. But the Apple's biggest argument has always been, look, we use the Apple computers. They've been the machines that education has used for so many years. It's like little kids in elementary school are using Apple computers, and the user experience is so easy. And they got away with that for a very long time. Whereas, for example, the Windows machines were the standard for the business world for a long time. So ability knowledge, it really depends how you want to represent yourself. In some cases, part of your unique proposition, your unique angle, may actually be that there are some barriers to entry. In fact, sometimes you may want to make it a point to not combat the fact that people are going to need to invest some time in the process. They're going to say, look, if this was meant to come easily, if this was meant to just be easy for everybody, then everybody would do it. And so the people that are willing to invest the time to really get good at it, that can understand that having this knowledge is going to give them a competitive advantage way beyond their peers, then it becomes worth it for them. So again, there's so many different ways you can tackle these objections. Mitch?
Yeah, I mean, you covered it perfectly well. There's not much I can add to that. I mean, it's ability and knowledge is, as you pointed out, a critical area that you really do need to think through. Where are they going to object to your product, the usage of your product in their own capabilities? And some products it certainly wouldn't apply, but for other products, it may be a much more of a substantial objection and more important than others. Some kind of product, the ability to use the product. We've got the software, but beyond the software is the thinking through all of this, ultimately writing your message and everything that's involved with a marketing campaign. For some people might look at this and say, this could be a little bit overwhelming. So right there is a ability knowledge objection. So let's just put that in there, overwhelming, right? The whole thing is over. It's gonna have to do. So the way one might want to answer that was one of the things that Sean just mentioned, that we're actually talking about in terms of how we're going to market this software moving forward, is the competitive advantage. Let me just type this. Is it potentially overwhelming when you look at everything? So one answer is that maybe it is on some level, but when you think about the competitive advantage that you get by using this programming and using this information, it's completely worth it. But the truth is, our software, because of the software, breaks it down into pieces. Would emphasize, again, using a demonstration and focusing in on the software, how easy it is to think through each individual specific part, which takes away the overwhelming. It's one step at a time. Don't try and climb the whole mountain in one shot. Of course, you can't do it. You won't be successful. But if you could break it all down into its core pieces, which is what we do, what our software does, that makes the overwhelming component much easier to not only address, but think about, and everything that comes along with that. So
what we're going to do, Mitch, we're going to move through the rest of these a little bit more quickly. What I'll ask you all to do is, if there's any part that you're stuck on, if you want some deeper explanation on anything we've covered already, or if you want to just introduce another question or something to the side of objections, by all means, please type your question in, and we will address it in this context. But just getting through the rest of these, competition. Now, what I'm going to state here emphatically, when it comes to competition, as much as anything, I believe this falls into a category that really has to do with your own confidence and mindset. At the end of the day, do you really think that Mike and Andy, or Mike Koenigs, or Frank Kern are ultimately, for lack of a better word, concerned or fearful of whatever competition might be out there? I would offer not at all. It doesn't mean that they're unaware of the competition that might be out there, but they're not afraid of it. Because as someone who is marketing a product or service, number one, you first have to have inherent belief that your product or service is truly serving people. It's really doing good. And from square one, if you can't look at your product or service and know that it meets that criteria, well, you've got a problem right from the get-go. So mission number one is making it so that you have a product or service you can believe in. Now, don't confuse that with making it perfect before you ever release it. There's no such thing. But you do have to have a product or service that you're in love with, that you know is going to inherently bring a lot of value to people. Because once you have that, then you know that you are always going to have your side of it. And this is why based on the earlier parts of the process, why going through your core elements was so important, because that's where you're really identifying the parts of your marketing that are just so critical, that the thing that makes your product or service so special, so unique, so inherently valuable, that it's so clear and you can fall in love with it and ultimately help other people out there in your marketplace to fall in love with it. So from a competitive standpoint, you know, the competition may be there, but you're doing everything you can in your process to sort of render that competition irrelevant. The other thing to consider is that more and more, especially in the world of digital publishing and online entrepreneurship, the notion of what a true quote-unquote competitor is changing all the time, because there are really two different philosophies of the world out there. You've got one philosophy where everything is sort of finite, and there's a bunch of entities out there just really fighting for their piece of the pie. And then you've got the other philosophy where it's much more of an abundance mindset, and rather than competitors, you actually have people who are interested in serving the community as a whole. And they're literally filling the gaps that others may have left in a different product. They're partnering together. And look no further than all the joint ventures, all of the affiliate marketing that has become so popular with the online entrepreneur community, and that tells you everything you need to know, is that it's really serving a higher purpose, trying to elevate the community as a whole through their products and services. So the combination of, number one, knowing that you have a product or service that you love, that you feel strongly about, that you would have your own mother use, or your own children using for their benefit, that's a starting point. And you add that to the notion that it's not a hyper-competitive environment that you have to fight for every cent. It's really an abundance environment where you are trying to serve the greater good, and in some cases, you may even involve some of your competitors. Some of your biggest competitors can be great partners in your process. So those are a few key things to keep in mind when it comes to competition. Last two over here don't need, last two, right, Mitch? Don't need it.
I put in two quick examples for competition here.
Sure, go ahead.
So first of all, we have, isn't the software just, talking about the software, isn't the software just another mind mapping software? We hear this from time to time. Mind mapping software, which is sort of, basic bubble brainstorming software. We would emphasize that our software.
Sometimes your audio is in and out, Mitch. Just make sure
our software is based on a proven framework. Might be one way to answer that. Our software is designed for specifically brainstorming like this, where it's structured out. The bubble management is all handled for you. The emphasize the training that comes along with the software package. You're not just getting a piece of software, you're getting an entire education on marketing that comes along with this. And also the ability to drill down to different areas. So you go to transaction, and then the ability to drill into different preset frameworks to be used later becomes a very big part of the answer to that objection, because certainly, although similar and inspired by mind mapping software, this is much more than mind mapping software is. Then note-taking software, for instance, might be another one. Oh, I've got this note-taking. Again, the same answer addresses that. So one answer could kind of hit both issues in one shot. But you would, by addressing the built-in framework, by the simplicity of use, the training that comes along with it, you're sort of taking out both those objections, which fall under the area of competition. I want to put an example out there. So we'll move on to the next one. Don't need it.
Yeah, and before that, Jonathan has actually made a really nice point here. So just worth mentioning for the benefit of the group. Let's use it with the client and take them step by step through their objections process. Helps to wear a therapist hat, an ability to listen and transcend what their real needs are, so clients see the value. It's the ability to read between the objections. Very well said. That's exactly what we're talking about here. Is in this process, you're trying to really think through all of these and understand what's at the heart of the real objections. For some of you who may come from the sales world and have had all sorts of old school sales training, many of you may have even been taught that the very first objection that comes out of the client's or prospect's mouth in a conversation, you don't even, you just ignore it. You just literally hurtle right over it, because all that is just pure resistance. It's sort of like, how's everything going today? And the first thing they tell you is, I don't have time to speak. Okay, well, great, no problem. And then you just move right on past it, as if it didn't even come out. It's literally a knee-jerk reaction. There's nothing real behind it. Having said that, I don't personally believe in invading people's time when they're not in a position to speak, but people are always going to be busy, so you have to get creative and figure out times to speak with people and get messaging across in the right way if you're in the world of sales and you're required to talk to people. So anyway, so last two here. And by the way, there are a couple questions here that are not exactly related to objections and influence. They're being asked by people in the community, so just for those of you that are asking those questions, we'll address that at the conclusion of this training, because they're not directly related to this, but I want to make sure you get the answers to your questions. So just keep that in mind. All right, so last two, why pay and technology. This is...
don't need it, we skipped that. Don't need it.
Oh, so sorry. Well, I think we've sort of been talking about that, Mitch. Don't need it. I already have a process. Again, I want to kind of move through objections, because I think people are getting the key thing, folks, is not that you necessarily know what each one of these is, or that we sit here right here and now and try to come up with 30 of these ourselves. It's not a very exciting or sexy process to see people going over. It becomes like watching an Andy Warhol movie about somebody sleeping. At the end of the day, it's important that you understand the idea behind all of this, which is in every category of these objections, you want to come up with as many as you possibly can, and don't stop just because you're drawing a blank for a minute or two. You really want to just think through as many of these as possible. So other categories, don't need it. Why wouldn't you need it? Well, I've got a process that's been working well. To which someone might say, how are you? My first question is, especially if it's a conversation with someone, well, what are you defining as working well? In other words, I've already had great product launch campaigns. Okay, well, what does that mean to you? What's a great product launch for you? Is that 1,000 new users? Is it 10,000 new users? Is it $100,000 in revenues? Is it $1 million in revenues? What is the definition of not needing it? What is so great about the current process? Do you believe that something can be improved? Do you believe that something might be better? So those are the ways to sort of approach those objections, and these are the kind of things you want to talk about. Anyone who's in business knows that there's always a better way. They can certainly celebrate the wins that they have, but to be out there thinking that there's no way to optimize or improve a process is really just asinine. You're just really shooting yourself in the foot. It doesn't mean they're going to pry your product or service, but the mindset, and really encouraging people to have the mindset of knowing that there's always a way that things can be improved, even if it's minuscule. Like when you're dealing with numbers of tens of thousands of visitors, even a 0.5% increase in conversion rate is huge. It's astronomical in the grand scheme of things. So if you can increase your percentages just by that small factor, the results are exponentially higher in many cases. So why pay? Again, this is sort of the YouTube argument. Nowadays, to me, YouTube is one of the greatest inventions of our time. To me, I call it Aladdin's lamp. It's, if I want to watch a Chris Rock comedy skit, if I want to hear something George Carlin said, if I want to see a clip from a movie, it's like literally wishing upon a star, typing into that search field, and getting anything I want. So with all that power, why should I pay for this? I can get trained in so many different ways for free. And, of course, that is true. But the difference is a lot of times training in and of itself is only training. You really want to tie it to a particular framework and a process that has actually been marshaled and optimized by a series of steps. It's not just a matter of 20,000 different pieces of information telling you one story. This
is also where the story becomes so essential.
Exactly.
Your story, because the story is what overcomes this, because your story is why buy from you. And that answers that question. So why pay? Because it's you. They're going to buy it from you because of your story. So that's a big point here where the story comes into play to overcome the YouTubes of the world and the Googles of the world and all the free information that is floating around out there. This is why the story has become far more essential to your marketing and your sales process, because it overcomes this objection probably most significantly.
Exactly. Give me just one sec, Mitch.
And also, I mean, obviously, having information that's unique to you, again, the story that they would have to buy from you if they want to hear. Anybody who wants to see these recordings that we're making right now, they have to buy our product. We may leak pieces of these out to the public to get make them want to see the other ones, and they're going to have to pay for that, for the software and in order to have access to it. Obviously, in our case, we have software. So if they want the software, they have to buy it. But when it comes to information, certainly it's not so simple. And the story, especially with info products, critical. Critical.
Absolutely. So do you have any others there, or you want to just go right to
technology? Is very straightforward. Be it I don't have the right computer as far as our software might apply. Anything pertaining to technology as far as your specific product or service, you think through what those could be and how do you address them? How do you explain or have the prospective customers have in their mind that they can overcome those obstacles, assuming they're legitimate.
All right. So again, if anyone has questions or wants us to shoot back and recover things, by all means, please type them in, and we'll be happy to address them and go back to objections. But right now, we want to move on to the influence tab. And for those of you that may be familiar with Robert Cialdini's book Influence, which was just groundbreaking and really established these principles of that make up the component that we call influence. Being able to influence your marketplace in such a way that you are clearly the choice that stands out for them. I will tell you that in the software, these elements are inspired by Cialdini's, but they're not meant to be interpreted on the nose exactly the way he described them. Some of you may not be familiar with the book, but if you haven't read it and you're doing any kind of marketing, I strongly encourage you to look up Cialdini. It's in fact, I'll even type it in here as a.
I think the title is just Influence, right?
The title is Influence, exactly.
I have an abstract and show you a copy, but it's just Influence. It says. Yeah.
Well, it's Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion is the actual title, but it's Cialdini is the author, and it's Influence.
Anyway, I'll just quickly list them out. We've got authority, social proof, testimonials, reciprocation. We'll explain what all these are. Commitment and scarcity. So those are the points of influence you want to think about when you're in your marketing.
Right. So starting with authority, and again, these are within the software. Let's just remind everybody, Mitch, about the help feature. Just clicking on the help feature, the question mark in there, that'll always bring up a basic definition there. And Mitch may or may not have it open at the moment, but if you want to get to the section,
it's open. No.
Okay, so if you actually click on the watch the training video, it will take you directly to the section of your member portal that has all this training and all the videos, so you could see the video that's appropriate for these areas. So
which is this this
well,
video.
Well, it's this.
If you're watching live, the video that will be linked to.
That's right.
Eventually, we're going to have more nuanced training, but for the moment.
Well, the point being is that within the training, we want you to not only have a written definition, some written help guidance, but also to be able to watch the video content. The point is simply that you can link directly through the software. You don't have to be in 2 or 3 open areas. You can just get there right from the software. So starting with authority, the key thing is the authority. This is where you're really establishing why you. This is really the why you question. What you're thinking about all the elements of your credibility. When you're giving a presentation on stage, for example, this might be what they call the credibility slide. So, for example, if you've spoken on Good Morning America, or if you're a best-selling author, if you're a PhD, if you've had multiple 8-figure launches in your business career, whatever elements are going to make for the reasons why people want to listen to you, this is what you're talking about here. Your
resume plays in. There's really 2 ways to build your authority: your resume, well, 3. Your resume or story, which would include relationships and things like that. Those are the 2 areas where you could have your authority established. It's your resume, you've got the credentials, or you've done the work, you've done for such and such a company, or you've got a story that builds that authority, and that story could be linking you to other experts and whatnot in order to establish your own credibility.
Absolutely. So social proof, the simplest definition and example we could really give here is just the whole idea of Facebook likes, comments, the entire social media networking that has been developed and is just continuing to grow and grow each and every day is really it's the realization of the value of social proof, seeing communities just get after a particular cause or topic. And it's funny, I can't remember who I was listening to. I think it was actually there's a sports radio broadcaster, Colin Cowherd. Some of you may be familiar with him, and I think he was actually talking about it, how things have changed. That back in the old days, for example, as fans, as sports fans, there was just really no power. You were literally just a casual observer or a passionate observer, but any of the decisions, any of the power about athletes really did rest in the hands of the fans. It was really much about the ownership and the powers that be, that famous powers that be session. Well, with the advent of he of course led to then the bringing on of talk radio and how that started to give fans a voice, but the ultimate voice really came through social proof and social media. I mean, literally governments have been toppled because of social media. Movements have been started because of social media. So just imagine the power of social proof. I mean, you've seen it in some of the most successful launches you've seen. Mike and Andy's Traffic Genesis, when you look on a page and see 5,000 to 10,000 likes and thousands of comments of positive support for an effort, it certainly takes you out of the fluke equation. When you've got that kind of a social following that are supporting your cause, product, or effort. So social proof, critically important in establishing influence.
And the other thing is you don't want to be overwhelmed with all this stuff. I mean, you want to talk about that just before in objections. You want to go through core elements, go through story theories, objections. Some of these, especially when it comes to like social proof, which is a whole step in its own right to actually get the social proof going. Get your video made first. Get your offer out there. Not everything has to be done all at once. You can take all of this in terms of application on a step-by-step basis. We'll talk about that more in the coming weeks as we go into funnel control.
Absolutely.
All right, so moving on to testimonials.
Yes, right, to testimonials. So, and of course, testimonials are, there's a lot of different ways to do testimonials. The one thing I will tell you just in terms of practical application, the best type of testimonials that you can do for yourself are the ones that demonstrate specific results. And more specifically, when you can talk about a testimonial in the context of what it is that you're talking about, it's even more powerful. So as an example, if you don't have a testimonial that shows results or specific dollars or specific percentages or anything like that, you could always do the he's a great guy and it's just a great product and I learned so much. Though, in the absence of something better, that's fine. But a lot of times, what I found is that people don't have the results testimonials because they're not asking the right questions about how to frame it. I can tell you that the best way that we've always gotten our testimonials is from people just actually contacting us and telling their story about their user experience and us just coming back and saying, hey, we really appreciate the kind words and support. Would you be kind enough to let us use these comments in a testimonial? And we've never had anybody say no. Most people are happy to have their name or their site or their...
We ask for a photo right there. We say, can you get a photo for us?
That's right.
We probably should ask for videos more often. We don't do it enough, but we immediately ask, hey, if it's okay, and please provide a photo if you're okay with it. And I would say, I don't know that anybody's ever rejected a photo to us.
No,
one guy did before you got involved. Like the first big testimony I got, I asked the guy for a photo. He goes, I'd rather not use it. You wouldn't give me a photo, or he'd let me use his full name.
Well, this was like before, it was so easy.
But outside of that, everybody's given a photo. We say, do you mind if we use your comments and expand on them? We ask her, you give us a little more information about it and you provide a photo. We'd love it and appreciate it. And people love it and they give it to us all the time.
So in terms of results,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you want to see what we're talking about, go to our other site, realwriting.com, REELwriting.com, and look at our testimonials page, and you'll understand what we're talking about.
Right. So, and all of those are totally unsolicited. Those were either somebody specifically saying, telling us a story or telling us about their experience. It wasn't us calling or cold calling a list and saying, hey, would you mind giving us a testimonial? It comes naturally through support interactions. That's the way to do it. But in terms of presenting the testimonials in your messaging, which is ultimately what we're getting at here, when you can use those testimonials that are aimed at where the results are clear and specific, and also when they're appropriate for the topic that you're talking about. So, for example, to be talking about how your program or service is powerful in one area, and then just talk about how somebody had all these sales, well, there's a little bit of incongruency in the messaging there. So the time to bring up a testimonial about results is that, and is in the context of how that plays out. So I'm just trying to think of a good example, Mitch, that I can give for people. But
I think the answer that you already said, I mean, is that where there's a testimonial where it's like, I use your software and I had this result. Like those kind of testimonials are the ones that are most powerful, where someone says, man, I just used your software and I couldn't believe the amount of sales I've never, our EPCs are up by $4 since applying your methodology and redoing our sales video or redoing our sales message using your software. That's the kind of thing you're looking for. And whatever it might be. I mean, if you've got a product that, is jewelry based, I don't know, a hard product, and someone goes and they, whatever they're, the people were commenting all night at the wedding about my, how nice it looked. Things like that. This is because it's speak to the end result that your customer wants. So if you go to your core elements tab, I'm not sharing anymore, but you go to the ultimate outcome and you look at what is it that your prospective customer ultimately really wants. Testimonials that speak to that are your best ones, because once you've thought through, this is what people want from my product or service, be it info, be it an actual product, testimonials that speak to that ultimate outcome are your best bet. And getting on to
I'm gonna just to make this case in point, Mitch, I'm not gonna say the person's name until he gives me permission. But this is just something that's happening in the course of training. He says, you guys are giving great marketing info here, and again, seeing it in action with OCC that gives you almost a PowerPoint slide experience, but the difference is it delivers 100% interactive quality for specialization in the moment. I mean, totally unsolicited. It happens.
And now we're waiting for the photo in our send the photo to support@controlwriter.com.
Yes, so Jonathan, who just gave his permission, thank you very much for that. And you'll hear Mitch in about 30 seconds send the photo right along to support so we could put it up.
You heard that already by the time he hears you say it.
That's right.
By the time he hears you say it, he already heard it.
But again, folks, in all sincerity, that's it. A lot of people just they don't think to use your support channels of the ways to feed that. Obviously, again, in the social media feed and having the comments and the likes feed as part of your site, all that's just a technology thing that encourages all this. But just visiting your community, and if somebody is even contacting you about something that hints at what might be a testimonial, you can drive the conversation so that they're giving you answers and feedback that can form the basis of how you use it in a testimonial.
One of the approaches we take, and this is just not exactly about this, is more about customer interaction, which has more to do with retention and back end, but it's all part of the program in general, so we'll talk about it since we're on this subject a little bit, is the people who reach out to us in support we consider either going to be our best customers or our worst customers. So we take those people who communicate with us in support very seriously, even for little things, because the ones who are communicating with us will either turn out to be the ones who are willing to go all the way with us, buy everything we offer, or they're going to be the ones who are the biggest pains and we want to boot them. But that's not quite as common. But it turns out your best customers are the ones who are talking to you and they're interacting with you, and they are the ones with the most potential to be repeat customers. We'll talk about it later, but that's what you want to pay attention to. And
I'm so glad you just brought that up, Mitch. Although it is a bit off topic for today, as long as we're on the subject. So many people have the tendency to get frustrated by people providing negative feedback or complaints when they contact support either by phone or by contacting you in writing. What you have to remember, and this is critically important, the people, negative or positive, that are contacting you in support, those are your action takers. Those are the people who care enough to spend the time writing to you. So when an action taker, people are always saying, God, I wish I can just find more buyers like so-and-so, or I just wish I can get more people that are interested and who care. Well, even the people that are shooting negativity in your face, they are an action taker. They're reaching out to you, telling you, look, these are the problems I'm finding with your product or service. If you can just address these and help me understand them better, I may be your biggest fan. And I can tell you that when I was in the financial industry for many years, those clients, believe it or not, were my favorite, because they were the ones that were savvy enough to know that, look, I have heard this before, buddy. If you're going to be doing something that's going to be providing value for me, I need you to demonstrate that, because right now I just don't see it. And once I was able to overcome that and actually show somebody where the value really was, they became my clients for life. They were my biggest fans because they see that you can pass the test. When someone is giving you negativity, they are asking you to pass the test. And if you can do that and not run from that, you will then have your next loyal supporter. I can't even tell you how many people in our community fell into that category. And once we took the time to care and demonstrate just how much we cared and how much we were wanting to try to address the issues, it's so powerful. So just remember, the ones that are actually contacting you, those are your action takers. In fact, those are the ones that whenever possible, if you can have some phone feedback, some way to contact them via telephone or encourage them to contact you via phone, I strongly encourage you to talk to those people. It's a really, really powerful thing. So Mitch, we can go back to the software.
Well, there's two more. I'll just quickly put the software back up and we'll just cover them up. Cover them. So the last two are on here is commitment and scarcity. So we'll do. Oh no, did we do reciprocation? We did not do that yet.
We just did testimonials. This was all really testimonials.
So reciprocation is very interesting because that's when you give somebody something as a gift, right?
Well, it's and I'll steal a little bit because reciprocation is that it's basically that law of reciprocation that when somebody gives you a gift, however unsolicited, there's a human tendency for most people, unless they're sociopaths, to want to return the favor in some way, shape, or form. The interesting thing is it is not in equal or lesser value to the gift that was given. In fact, most of the time it's actually the opposite. And the example Cialdini uses is that you go out of a room and you go to the Coke machine and you bring back a couple of Cokes for the people in the room, you hand them a soda, and then when the group breaks to go to lunch, inevitably someone's going to buy you lunch. So you went from a 50-cent or a 75-cent soda to getting someone to buy you lunch. And this happens so many different ways. In fact, our entire marketing concept of starting with Facebook, or starting with an initial what we call lead generation, to give an email, basically you're asking for an email address, you're giving all this great value in the hopes that by demonstrating that value, by demonstrating that that service for people are going to start to say, well, these people just gave me something really valuable that I can use. I'll bet there's a lot more value, and boy, I sure feel like I need to thank this person. It's very subtle. It's not always that overt. It's not like you give somebody a freebie and all of a sudden they want to spend $1,000 with you just because they feel they need to reciprocate. But it's certainly it's one of many layers and many seeds that gets planted as part of the process of influencing somebody in their buying decision. These are people who are willing to give away such value in what they do that, God, imagine if I was a paying customer. It's really planting that seed in there and continuing to give and emphasizing that law of reciprocity, that people are going to receive and they're going to feel like it's in their, not only do they want to give back, but it's in their best interest to want to give.
In terms of your own marketing, it's what kind of free gifts can you give out? An ice cream shop will sit outside and give little free samples out. Not only is it a demonstration of the ice cream potential if they walk in the store, but there's a reciprocation play. Well, I just got a little bit of free ice cream, all of a sudden I'm inclined to go buy a cone.
That's right. It's a perfect example, Mitch. The classic, the food sampling is a perfect execution of the law of reciprocity.
Go to Costco, these stores, they're giving out food like crazy. It does two things. It's a demonstration of how good the food is, and there's a reciprocation play going on. People feel now like compelled to go buy a whole bag of the thing simply because they had a tablespoon-sized sampling.
Right. And in fact, I experienced this on a personal level just on Sunday. I was actually at the supermarket with my kids, and the Boar's Head person was there at the deli. And the interesting thing is, although this wasn't an entirely conscious thing at the time, but there was a part of me that didn't want to take samples because I knew that I wasn't going to buy. You know, I wasn't going to then turn around at the counter and then order the cheese or order that sauce. And, you know, she was a really nice lady, and she kept encouraging me. She says, okay, give the kids some turkey, and, you know, whatever the case may be. But the point is, it's so powerful.
Funny, he came home with 2 pounds.
What's that?
You came home with 2 pounds, right?
No, I still didn't buy. I was fair. I'm a jerk. I didn't buy. But the point is, it's like even in the reverse, it's so powerful. Like it was literally in my mind. Look, I'm not going to buy this. It's okay. I don't need your samples. I don't want to accept the gift because I feel bad about the fact that I know that I'm not here to buy what you're offering right now. You know, a classic impulse purchase. And of course, it tasted great. And of course, I wanted to buy it. I just didn't need it and whatever. But anyway, the point is that that law of reciprocation is really, really very strong.
And you want to think through like how you can then again in the software you want to think through how you could, you know, different ways to apply the law of reciprocation. Mm-hmm. The next one is commitment. So this one's a little more nuanced, a little more takes a little more to understand exactly how it applies. So you want
right. So in terms of commitment, what this is really referring to is trying to reinforce small commitments on the way to a bigger commitment, and this is demonstrated in a lot of different ways. In online marketing, this is really best demonstrated through what you see in terms of the various ways to do lead capture. You know, we went from where it used to be pretty much give your name and email address and then you get this, okay? And it's gradually evolved over time to the point where you're ultimately trying to do and ask for the least amount of commitment possible initially, building up to larger commitments. And Mike and Andy have referred to this in some of their recent trainings, some of you may have seen, by what they call micro commitments. Okay, and this is really what this concept is. This is the aspect of asking for very small commitments, ultimately leading up to a big commitment. So, for example, if you have a video, let's say, the first step in a cold traffic advertisement might be to actually allow somebody to play the video. And maybe what you do is you only use part 1 of the video. And then when somebody clicks, you know, you have a message right underneath the video, it says, click here for the second part. And after you do that, now it takes them to a page that asks them for their name and or email. And the theory is that someone who's already invested that far with the small commitment of clicking the play button previously, well, if all it takes to sort of finish the story is just giving a name and email, they're more inclined to continue on with that commitment because they already did it the first time.
The place where I see commitment on the internet right now, which is a subtle place, is you go to the news sites, and then they'll show page 1. You got to click page 2 to continue reading the article. I think what's going on there is they want to be able to there's a commitment there to now continue reading, so it's giving them stats about what people are interested in and what not. But I don't think that's what it's really about. Is now they can display an entire new set of advertisements. Obviously, if I read to the bottom of this one without clicking away, by going to the new page, now a whole new set of advertisements to put in front of me. So
that's exactly right.
Monetizing the page better.
Exactly right. It's ultimately designed to generate revenues, generate interest, and everything else, and that's the way we do it. But the point here is that rather than than asking somebody to take the largest possible commitment, the principle of commitment is when somebody is sort of already on the path. It's like, an object in motion tends to stay in motion. Just getting them to do that one small commitment will often lead to greater commitments on the back end. So back to the software, Mitch. Going after commitment, we come to
scarcity. The final of the influence and entire position control side of the software is scarcity. Correct.
So what happens when you walk into a store and you really want something, you really want that product, and you realize that, I don't have enough cash on me right now, or I left my credit card at home, and you ask the salesperson, you say, I left this, I really want this. How many more of these do you guys have in stock? And they tell you, oh, we just got a new shipment in yesterday. This would be the inexperienced sales clerk who's trying to help. Oh, don't worry about it. We've got 1,000 of them in stock. How urgently are you going to run out of the store to go get your credit card and inconvenience yourself just to buy that one item? Probably not that much when you have plenty of stock, okay? But you ask the same question and they say, you know what, it's been crowded. We got these things in, they've been jumping off the shelves. I think I've got like 3 left in the back. But I know that, you know, school is letting out in an hour and the kids are coming in real soon. Well, what are you going to do at that point? You may ask them to hold it for you, or, hey, can you hold it? I live right around the corner. I'll be right back. I just need to grab my credit card. You know, again, the idea of scarcity. If the resources are limited, then people are more apt to take advantage of an offer in a much more quick fashion. So what you're trying to do with your elements of scarcity are to come up with ways that enhance or induce real scarcity. I emphasize the idea of genuine. When scarcity is phony, like you know that you've got 500 seats, it never fills up, but you tell people you got 3 seats left, smart people are insulted by those kinds of tactics, and they can see right through them. Real scarcity is just simply saying, is making the case for your past events. So let's say that you really do have a seminar, for example, you're trying to fill a live event. And so you tell people, look, right now we're just opening up, so naturally we've got a couple hundred seats left, but here's the story. Okay, last year we introduced this same event. We opened up, and in less than 24 hours, the event was completely sold out. So right now, I just opened the cart, so you can go ahead and register, but I can't speak for the next hour. Okay, and again, you're using past history as a way to demonstrate genuine scarcity, even though you have maybe in this moment many seats left. The point is, acting from integrity and authenticity is always going to resonate better with people than trying to come up with this idea of phony scarcity, knowing full well. You know, if the cart closes on a certain date, but you know darn well that the cart never closes, you know, people can see through that. So there has to be elements of reality and integrity behind what you're doing in your scarcity market. Mitch?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, scarcity is any kind of limitation in terms of the availability of your product or service. I mean, it could be lots of different ways to apply scarcity. Your time, if you're in a service business where there's only so many hours in the day, only so many slots, you know, there could be a time-based scarcity. Listen, I only got, whatever amount of slots available, so, it could be, as Sean pointed out, a quantity based scarcity. There could be, a lot of these big launches of products, they'll do the cart is going to close. Traffic genesis, which we've talked about a number of times in these trainings, because it's in the middle of the launch, they're going to close that cart next week. That's it. You won't be able to buy that product anymore, at least not with the bonuses that there's a big bonus package right now that's being offered. It will probably be available at a potentially more expensive price and without all the bonuses. So there's the scarcity play that they're applying.
Correct. They're not. A lot of smart marketers are realizing, well, something's so great, why would I stop selling it? So they've gone from cart closes, the perception that you can never get it at a certain time, to just letting them know that that this is a grand opening, and this grand opening is only going to happen once. So
we talked about a flash sale on last week. We were talking about a story. And it's the other training. So in there would be a scarcity play. This is a one-day discount. There's a scarcity play. A flash sale would be a scarcity. So any kind of way to legitimately discount or limit the time frame or quantity in which your product or service is available. I was just thinking about Amazon. Amazon, every single product is like this. 3 left. There's 5. They let you know how many are left. Of course, they never seem to run out. But because they always have like continuous, ongoing shipments from these resellers.
QVC and home shopping.
Right, but they are but there's 3 in the warehouse. There's 3 left. Because I'm sure, especially one of those places where you definitely could step on the FTC, get the FTC to kind of pay a little bit of attention to you, because you can't be dishonest with some of these things. And certainly, if Amazon is saying there's 3 left, they're big enough that they would be flagged pretty quickly. So, but clearly they're not running out of these popular items. It's just that they've got just such a steady stream at any given moment. Right now, there's 3 left. The fact that tomorrow there's going to be another 6 or 7 arriving, because every day that's what arrives, whatever amount they need arrives.
Right.
But you can see that ongoing scarcity play there. Just go to Amazon, look up anything, and it says how many are left.
Right. So, in terms of this, I think we've sort of gone through this. What I want to do now is I want to continue to take open questions now that we've gone through the training. Again, for obviously as an OCC customer, all of these replays are available in your training area. We'll continue to enhance the training, and just as another reminder, as soon as Mike is through with, he's through with the Traffic Genesis launch, we're probably going to start in early to mid-July. We'll start our hot seat sessions so that we can actually work with you directly on your campaigns, filling in these various elements in the software and taking private help in that regard, working through all these things. But again, we're not going to do a replay mailing for this. You have to access these recordings within your training content. So Mitch, I want to just sort of go to what we had in open questions. Now, recently we had opened up to our real writing film and television community just some of the ideas. We tend to separate our communities and really focus and communicate on what's appropriate for them. But as if it wasn't obvious, we recently decided to, just because of the excitement of everything that's been going on and the feedback we've received, we decided to approach members of our film and television community because we figured there may be some of them who are writing or trying to write a script as a hobby and not necessarily trying to do it for a living. It's something they want to pursue. They'd love to sell a script, but at the end of the day, they have their real jobs, things they do to earn money, and the script is their hobby. So we didn't just force the messaging. We were very open and we were very clear that this might not be for everybody, but we invited them to basically opt into joining to hear about other control writer products. The only reason I'm sharing this with you now is because we have a number of those people on this training today who are asking questions about the importance of marketing and how to do better at selling their scripts or their stories. So there are a couple of questions about that. I'm not going to say the names, but someone was asking early on, I'm just trying to find it. I'm a screenwriter who wants to know the best and easiest way to market my stories as well as my Celtic shoes I make. And if you want me to say your name, by all means, this person, please just chime in, and I'll be happy to mention your name on the training. But absence of that, let's just take a step back, Mitch, and really just talk about what we're trying to do in this whole process, because really to answer that question, it really comes down to understanding what we've done in previous trainings. So as a user of Offering Conversion Control, just know that all of these trainings, of course, are available to you. But what you're going to want to start out with in any process is you're going to want to go back to the core elements. Okay, you're going to want to go back to the core elements tab within the software and really start to identify all of those components, because that's really going to be the spine for everything you do ultimately in your message, in the story that you tell. It really all starts with those core elements, understanding who that you're going to be talking to, what are they looking for, what do they want, what do they need, understanding the elements of your story. And so, Mitch, let's go ahead and jump back here, because I think it'll help to see this in the software. So let's go ahead and pull up the software again, and let's go right to the core elements tab.
Here we are.
Yes, perfect. Yes. So this is the core tab on the position control side, and we're talking about core elements. And the only difference is in past trainings and examples, when we do hot seats and when we do other trainings like this, we typically use the example of, in fact, Mitch has been using the tire example up to this point, but we'll typically be talking about marketing a product or service. So the only difference for those of you in the film community who are looking to sell stories or scripts or other projects is you're talking now just about that in the context. So what's the product? Well, the product is your script or your story that has such and such name. The consumers are either agents, they're either agents, independent production companies, or producers.
What this really lets you think about, from that point of view, is, as you go through the right side and you understand the circumstance that a producer might be in, is they need a screenplay that can be made for $1 million, the movie, and it's good for X, foreign market. And that's literally what exists out there for writing opportunities, are producers who have financing, but they need a family film with a dog that can be made for $500,000, yet have one, whatever it might be. So now,
you know what, Mitch? Let's just go ahead and add even more value here, just in case, because I want you to be able to revisit this. So let's just, instead of being general about it, let's just go all the way. We're not going to do all of them, but let's just fill in a few of these. So basically, what you just said, Mitch, if you're let's focus on, let's make it a horror film, okay? So the product in this case is your script, which is a horror script. Mitch is just adding, I guess, notes.
Directly might be a little different. So product is horror screenplay, right?
The product is a low budget horror script. Again, for those of you that may have no interest at all in the film or television industry, know that this could be any product or service. It's just we're using the example now of a digital product or an intellectual property, which is a script. Okay, so the circumstances of your consumer, again, this is the circumstance that they're in. They're not just who they are demographically. This isn't just male producers between the ages of 30 and 50. With 2 kids and all of those things. What's their circumstance? Well, maybe one of your target clients might be, a small production company on the rise, just coming off their last big hit, and they're looking for their next low-budget feature that they can turn into a massive hit.
Right, and what you'll see is like they put out, like, there's groups that will put out like calls for screenplays, and you'll see stuff like. Producer in need of a screenplay that includes a family and a dog being terrorized by a creature in a woodland retreat. I just made it up, but it's like very specific. So the solution is, hey, I have a screenplay that meets that needs, right?
Exactly right. Exactly. I have that.
And in the screenwriting world, sometimes it feeds the other way. It's sort of like you got to be in the right place at the right time. This is where that kind of this is where that comes into play, that kind of being in the right place at the right time. I happen to write a screenplay that meets these exact requirements that are needed.
Right. So Mary, in this context, whatever your story is, what you're really doing in this process is understanding, which voice do you need to speak in? Because when you're walking into a pitch meeting, or when you're even preparing to start to release this to the community, you're essentially needing to figure out which message is going to resonate best with that group. So, for example, if you know that you're doing your research on screenplay competitions and you're trying to determine between 3 different competitions which one to enter, well, you can take that screenplay competition and essentially reverse engineer that competition into the consumer side of what this is. So let's say you don't know which script is going to be appropriate yet. You first want to try to determine, well, let me see if I can understand how this screenplay competition works and who it's appropriate for. So let's say that competition A is basically, it's going to be read by a group of producers primarily from the horror genre, or a group of producers primarily in the family film genre. Okay, the circumstance is that they're looking to pick 1 to 3 winners with cash prizes of between $5,000 and $15,000, et cetera, and you start to sort of break out the components of what the profile of that competition is, and then from there, because you've got such a clear understanding of what they're looking for, you can then determine what type of story or what script that you have that might fit that particular competition best, because you've taken the time to think about what's going to be a good match. So, for example, let's just say one of the judges reading that particular script is someone who in the last 3 years, the winners have been a low-budget horror film, a romantic comedy, and this. Well, you know that if this is the type of judge that rarely selects an action thriller, well, the last script you want to submit to that kind of a judge is an action thriller. They have demonstrated time and again that they have a preference for those type of things. And by the way, these production companies usually are not secretive about what they're looking for. They're very clear that they are looking for rom-coms, romantic comedies, or they're looking for a family film, or they're looking for a low-budget horror film, or they're looking for a big-budget action thriller. So, I think
definitely the value of this software, if you would apply it to the screenwriters, since we're trying to think that through, I'm just here listening and thinking about it myself. I definitely the left-hand side here, thinking this area here, product, solution, needs, spirit, will really help you think through what your screenplay is about, what advantages, like it will help you going through the exercise, certainly on the left. The right can be a little more, it's harder to pinpoint who in the industry may or may not be interested, but certainly when you think about the left-hand side and potentially your preeminent distinction, what's unique about your screenplay, that exercise could be very valuable. And I think when we get into lead gen and transaction tabs, when you're communicating what it is about you, you're trying to get someone interested in your screenplay, the frame, the hook, the point of entry, visual, these will really apply very powerfully to when you do put together pitches, and then the transaction, the longer, pitch, this is to get someone interested in your pitch. Yeah, I would like to hear that pitch. I'd like to read that screenplay. And the transaction more, when you really get into more of a, get into a studio sit-down kind of situation where then you could have this, maybe be beneficial for you if you have that kind of opportunity. Look, the challenge of screenwriting at the end of the day is you got to write a good screenplay, and that's no different, which is what Plot Control, our other software, is all about. It's about writing a really good screenplay. And as this applies to marketing, I want to bring it back to marketing, and then I'll let you finish on, is that what this software does, just like Plot Control does for a screenwriter, just that, it helps a screenwriter put together a well thought out, fully thought out, well-written screenplay. This software helps a marketer put together a well-thought-out, fully thought-out, just to use the bad language a second time, well-thought-out, fully thought-out marketing campaign.
Right, and by the way, when we say marketer, we're not talking about just an online marketer or internet marketer. We mean anyone who is in the process of marketing or selling a product or service.
Yeah, it could be anything. You could use again. You could use this quick sale or product sale and the framework in here for probably one-on-one selling. I mean, you little tweaking, but for the most part, you could put together your message right here in this that you bring out into the field if you sell even insurance or legal services or literally things like that.
Right, and again, as we get into the future trainings, we're going to cover everything on the funnel control side of things. But Mitch, just go back to lead gen real quick, because I just want to close this out for Mary and others in that community. Is again, it's not a maybe, it very much applies. So when you're thinking about the elements of frame and the headline or hook, these are all the things you need to think about as you are preparing your pitch. What are the visual elements? Are you going to have screenshots? Are you going to do a what's called a sizzle reel? Are you going to do that? Have those visual aids? What's your conversion point? In this case, you're not getting the click, but you're trying to get the next meeting. Your conversion point is set the next meeting for more interested parties.
Or get them to read the screenplay. Might be request the screenplay.
Exactly. In fact, you're right. In this case, with the first lead gen, I take it back. Mitch is right. So in this case, they probably haven't read the script yet. It's that sounds really interesting. I think I'd like to read. If we scroll over to the right a little bit more, that's when we go and we get. And the next move is they read the screenplay. Now we're trying to get them to get the opt-in, set the next meeting, schedule an actual call or conference with more interested parties. And then when you go to the transaction, this is when you would be giving the longer and the more thought-out pitch of exactly what happens, really starting to break out scene by scene what happens, not literally scene by scene, but sequence by sequence, story point through story point, of what's happening in your movie. You're bringing in all kinds of visual elements when you have them available to help tell the story, understanding what it really is. So the difference is that most people in the industry, when they are actually trying to pitch their story or they're trying to do this, they don't have the benefit of a tool like this to actually get them to think on a deeper level, on a business level, of understanding what it is that a producer or director or even a famous actor wants to hear or see about your story that's going to make it really interesting. And when you're able to apply this to that process and go from this angle, you're just coming from such a different place here. Really the ability to just powerfully tell these stories. So Mary and others, I hope that was helpful for you. We wanted to give an example in other industries not related necessarily to marketing, but certainly Hollywood arguably is a pretty darn good marketing machine. And again, whether they are saying it or not, they are following the principles and the foundations of this framework, as we've said in previous trainings, regardless of whatever cool name any of the big experts want to call it themselves. These are the principles and the structure that they're applying when they're teaching all of this. So just looking for any questions. We've actually gone on longer than most in this case, so if there's any last questions here, I'll just, Mitch, go ahead.
We're going to be covering
question chat. so it hits that in real time. Any last-minute questions, go ahead and just type them in here, because I think we've tried to answer most of them along the way. And by the way, for those that might have asked us, technical questions about the software or other products, or how can I get this or how can I get that, the best way to do that is really just to contact support directly, which again is support@controlwriter.com, and you could also call us at 877-540-1739 anytime, and we're happy to help that way.
So the next session should possibly be this coming Thursday. Otherwise, it'll be someday next week. And we're going to cover lead generation. We're going to cover the first tab and the funnel control side of things. We're going to go through lead gen, followed by the next one after that will be transaction. Then we'll finish up with retention and back end. All this training again will be available in the portal, member portal, that's pretty much where we're at. I guess we can wrap this up.
Well, not just yet. So one question come in from Catherine. Catherine, I'm just trying to get some clarification on what the question is. It just said it seems if PC2 and OCC were blended, it could save time, meaning if there isn't a market, do you really want to spend the time writing your story?
A huge question.
I think she means plot control, not presentation control in this context.
She's talking about plot control, but let me tell you, because it applies here, first of all, there's absolutely going to this, if you have a product or service, attacking this software, just on the broad scope, not in screenwriting, and using the software to think through your core elements. What is your product going to be? Who is the marketplace? Think it through all the way in that context. You could very much predetermine before you invest a huge amount of yourself, a huge amount of money, whether or not it's even a worthwhile endeavor. Now, to bring it more specifically down to the question that's being asked, me and my partners in terms of screenwriting, when we do have ideas for movies, the first thing we do, and I'm sort of just using this as an example, we go into plot control with an idea, we break it all down, and then we say, well, first we decide, is the story even working for us? Do we like it? Do we want to invest our time in it? And then we go the step further and say, okay, well, if we did this, who are we selling it to? Who are we marketing this to? Who can we show it to? Who are the people we can plug it into, and is there a market for it? So just like we use it there, the answer is absolutely. It's a very valuable exercise, whether specifically for screenwriting, as we've been discussing, or for the marketing in general, which is what this really is about, offer conversion control, to go through and start thinking through your core elements and your story and potentially objections, and start thinking about, is this really even a worthwhile endeavor if you are at that initial stage of considering a product or service, to brainstorm that product or service you're thinking about bringing to market and make a decision based on the results that you find in the software.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So again, folks, I like to remind everybody sometimes, because there's a tendency to put a lot of this credit to Mitch and I as we deliver training, or it's just natural if you like a presentation, and don't make no mistake, we appreciate the kind words and the feedback, but the thing to remember for yourself here is we are not the stars. The star here is the process and the software. Okay, this is here as a repeatable and scalable process for you to use time and time again. Yes, Mitch and I certainly have some facility with it. We've created it. We've been learning it. We've been studying this for a number of years. We've got relationships throughout the industry, and so we've certainly put our chops together to certain levels of mastery in certain areas. But part of it is because we wanted to take that knowledge and put it into a framework that we could refer back to time and time again as we needed to. So I want to always make sure that everyone knows that this resource is here for you to refer back to, with or without Mitch and myself. But of course, in the training, you'll always have Mitch, myself, Mike, and Andy in many cases, and you'll always have all that other expert knowledge that goes along with it. But at this point, just trying to see if there's any last questions. I don't see any. Mary, thank you for that last comment. We really appreciate that, and we agree. It is very helpful. So for everyone that has joined us here live today, I want to just thank you again. Please send your feedback, comments to support@controlwriter.com. Although we've got a schedule of training that we're rolling out, of course, making sure we deliver on everything and more that we promised in the original offer. We are open to your comments, and if there's something you really want to hear about, if there is a certain example you want us to cover in a future session, like I said, once we get through the primary training of that day's event, if there's time, we will do what we did today, which is answer a question related to or not related to that day's training to really go back and explain it in a lot more detail. So to all of you who have joined us, thank you so much. For Mitch and I, signing off for today. Have a great day, everyone, and we'll see you in the next training.
Bye, everybody.